Hello and welcome to today's webinar, a complete hybrid and multi-cloud EUC solution. This event is brought to you in partnership with Nutanix and produced by Actual Tech Media. Thank you so much for joining us on the webinar today. We got a great presentation lined up for you with an expert on this topic who I'll be introducing you to here in just a moment. Before we do that, there's just a few things that you should know about the event today. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'll be serving as your moderator. As always on our Actual Tech Media events, we want these to be educational and we want to help to solve your technology challenges. We'll be doing a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the webinar today, and we encourage your questions there in the questions pane. So we want to help to answer those questions. So get those questions in early, and we'll be doing our best to answer every one of them. We also have a number of really excellent resources available for download there in the Handouts tab. There are two different customer spotlights on end user computing. There's the end user computing solutions brief, the total economic impact of the Nutanix end user computing solution, and virtual desktops and applications for dummies, the full ebook. So make sure that you check out those resources in the Handouts tab and download those. They won't be as easily accessible after the webinar today. And then at the end of the webinar, I'll be announcing the winner of our Visa $300 gift card door prize. If you're watching this on demand, of course, the drawing has already occurred. The prize terms can be found there in the Handouts tab. And then also on this event, we've got our best question prize as well for another $50 Visa gift card. You must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms as well, and we'll contact the prize winner for that after the webinar. And with that, it's time to introduce you to today's expert presenter. Welcome, Mr. Steve Kaplan. Steve has been in the industry a long time, well known to many of the folks in the world of enterprise IT, and I'm excited to have him. Steve is the Vice President of Customer Success Finance at Nutanix. Steve, it's great to have you on.
Thanks, David. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, take it away, Steve.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to the session. As David said, my name's Stephen Kaplan, better known on Twitter as Roi Dude. And I wrote an article last year titled "The 10 Reasons Why Nutanix is the Best Platform for Citrix." And today I'm going to go over some of these reasons about why Citrix and Nutanix are better together, as well as the advantages of a hybrid and multi-cloud Nutanix plus Citrix solution. And David, let's go ahead and go to our first poll.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've got a few polls during the event today, of course, and we appreciate everyone's participation in these. The question on the screen is, when you need funds for an EUC initiative, what do you require? And the answers are there. It's pretty self-explanatory, but nothing is, my request good enough? Or are you going to have to present and really make your financial case to the executives at your company, either internally with some sort of ROI or TCO analysis, or externally with a vetted financial analysis of some kind, or maybe just finance never approves your IT projects. I know I've been a manager in the world of enterprise IT, and that can sometimes be the case as well, or at least the feeling. But hopefully, if you have enough justification and analysis, as I know Steve's going to talk about on the event today, you can make your case successfully. So if you haven't answered the poll, it's right there in the slides window. Select your response, and I'm about to share the results. What do you think there, Steve?
I can't see the actual percentages on my screen.
Oh, okay. It says 60% is what I'm seeing for those who say they need to submit a detailed ROI or TCO analysis. 28% say their request is good enough. And then 3% have an external financial analysis required, and 7% just never get their proposals approved.
Well, good. Well, I'm glad to see the detailed internal analysis wins. So, over the years, I've been very fortunate to co-author, along with senior technical architects, 5 books on Citrix and 3 on VMware. I wrote the business parts. My co-authors all told me that I wrote the easy parts. And in 2019, I came out with my first solo book, The ROI Story, A Guide for IT Leaders. Mark Templeton, the longtime CEO of Citrix, graciously wrote the foreword. And the book is geared toward helping IT professionals utilize a financial analysis framework, not only for evaluating disruptive technologies, but for the ones that make sense. Then how do you build a business case? How do you gain the consensus and the funding you need to actually deploy the technology? Over a period of 20 years, I started, ran, and ultimately sold to award-winning channel partner businesses. And rather than use conventional sales methodologies, we would use ROI TCO to help our customers evaluate disruptive technologies, such as Citrix solutions. My first company, Rhino Technology, in fact, was named the first Citrix Partner of the Year. This was back in 2000. And shortly after selling my second consultancy, I moved up to Lake Tahoe, where I envisioned this nice, cushy consulting career. And just after moving up, I get a call from a friend, a former Citrite and a VMware VCDX. He goes, "Hey, Steve, I joined this hot startup in the infrastructure space, and especially in the VDI space. I think you could be a good fit. Come interview." Now, I wasn't looking to go to work for anybody. I just moved up to Lake Tahoe. But I met with the startup, and I was really impressed with the people. And I was blown away when they showed me their technology. What they had done is taken the same type of web scale architecture pioneered by Google in the cloud space, and now used by all the leading cloud providers, and they brought it to the enterprise. In fact, the lead scientist who developed the Google file system was one of the co-founders of the startup. And so what it did is it let enterprises run even the most demanding of applications now. Instead of on SANs, they're able to get rid of their SANs, instead run it on software, a distributed file system on commodity servers, aggregating the local storage of the servers, the disk and the flash. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, if this actually works as advertised, this would change not only VDI, but the entire IT industry as we know it. But shortly, right away, I really kind of started second guessing myself and thinking, how often does a tiny 50-person startup realistically have a prayer against the handful of multi-billion-dollar giants that completely dominate not just the data center, but as I knew full too well, the entire reseller channel, which of course uses a lot of influence. So I didn't join, but as I watched Nutanix's explosive growth over the next year, I became increasingly convinced that they had a real opportunity to pull off one of the business upsets of the decade. And I knew I had to be a part of that. I gave up my dreams of a cushy consulting career, went back to work 70 hours a week at a startup. And this was 8.25 years ago. But it's been this incredible opportunity to participate, as Nutanix unquestionably has changed the industry. The technology it pioneered became known as hyper-converged infrastructure, or HCI for short, and it's certainly mainstream. IDC said HCI revenues were $8.4 billion last year, projects them at just about $13 billion 2024. And of course, Nutanix long ago went public and joined the billion-dollar ranks itself. When I started at Nutanix, this was our marketing, the no SAN logo. And back then, every leading data center manufacturer kind of scoffed at this notion of running serious applications on software instead of on big proprietary SANs. Today, they all offer their own HCI solutions, some even more than one. And the SiliconANGLE had a December article where they said that the days of selling storage controllers that mask the deficiencies of spinning disk or add embedded hardware functions, those days are gone. And even VMware, which is 85% owned by EMC, tweeted earlier this year, January 4th, it's nearly impossible to satisfy real-time business needs with traditional three-tier infrastructure. And by three-tier, we mean centralized storage plus storage network plus servers. Nutanix recently issued its third annual Enterprise Cloud Index. This is a report compiled by the research organization Vance & Born, who surveyed 3,400 IT decision makers from enterprises across the globe. And not surprising, at least to me, 86% of the respondents said that hybrid cloud is their ideal operating model. One thing I did find surprising was that 76% of the respondents said that the COVID-19 pandemic has caused IT to be viewed more strategically within their organization. Something, of course, that CIOs have long since sought and something that I've long since advocated. Unfortunately, though, this is not likely the case for the organizations that still run on traditional three-tier based infrastructure. A Vanson Bourne 2020 report says that 89% of those surveyed feel that their organization should be spending more on innovation. But when the majority of IT budget goes to just keeping the lights on of a legacy three-tier infrastructure, it doesn't leave much left for innovation, even within IT's own domain, let alone assuming a major role in business leadership. In my ROI book, I make the case that the legacy data center model, the three-tier data center model, is broken. And I include several examples supporting this assertion. This is my favorite. This is a tweet by Mustafa Kali, who authored the book Storage Design and Implementation in vSphere 6. And he boasted on Twitter that he fit all 1,242 pages in one volume. I mean, 1,242 pages. This is a big, thick, heavy book. Pre-pandemic, when I used to travel, I would sometimes lug it along as a speaking prop. It would take up over a fourth of my suitcase. One time I had a TSA agent stop and search my suitcase because he didn't believe me when I told him that big object that showed up in the x-ray was a book. Now, in contrast, the Nutanix equivalent to storage design and implementation in vSphere, because even though we have our own KVM-based hypervisor, still about half our customers still run vSphere. The equivalent is this 22-page tech note. So the 1,220-page delta represents not just all the complexity of three-tier SAN-based infrastructure, but also all the cost that's inevitably associated with that complexity as you have more pieces to manage, you have administrators required for the SANs, for the storage fabric, you have increased vulnerability, and so on. And let's go ahead and go to our next poll.
Absolutely, yeah. We've just brought up our poll on the screen that says, how virtualized are your desktops? 100%, 80 to 100%, or we have a long way to go. Curious to see the feedback on this poll. You're making some great points, Steve, on how complexity results in increased cost. I know I've got your book, the ROI Story. It's an excellent resource. And I like where you're going with this. So let me go ahead and share the results of this poll with everyone out there. Thank you to all those who responded. If you haven't got your vote in now, it's now time to submit it. And it looks like just 3% are 100% virtualized, or sorry, 13% are 100% virtualized, 26% are 80 to 100, and then 60% have a long way to go. What's your take, Steve?
Yeah, I think that's pretty representative. You know, it's probably higher than is typically out there because of the nature of the event. But there's a lot of savings, as we'll go over, in virtualizing your desktops. So when I joined Nutanix, it was actually to start the channel partner program. In fact, Nutanix was so small in those days that for the first couple of months until we started hiring like crazy, I was the channel partner program. It didn't take too long, though, for former clients of mine to notice my job title change on LinkedIn and give me a call and say, what is a Nutanix? And one of those was Bob Orcus, who at that time he was CIO of Fairway Independent Mortgage Company that he joined the previous year. And in those days, Fairway was much smaller than it is today, but it was still very fast growing. So fast, in fact, that they had outgrown their vBlock just 1 year after they purchased it. And for those of you who are newer to the industry, vBlock was the granddaddy of converged infrastructure, the pre-packaging of the SAN and servers and network. And when I told Bob about Nutanix, he said, hey, would you do a TCO for buying this Nutanix stuff versus buying vBlock? Because that's what you're seeing here. This is still the way one of the ways we present our analysis results today on a cash flow basis year by year. And you can, and in Fairway's case, back in those days, we looked at the the hardware, software, the planned expansion of both scenarios. We looked at rack space, power, cooling, took a very, very conservative approach to administrative savings, and we didn't even quantify business benefits at all, something that tends to feature prominently in our analyses today. But still, Bob was impressed enough with the projected $900,000 in 5-year savings. They took a gamble and was in a very young technology, very small Nutanix, very new Nutanix, and brought it into his enterprise to run his 700 employees on Citrix. And they had great results, all kinds of glowing testimonials, not only from the IT staff, but from the users. And today, Fairway now is one of the top 3 largest private mortgage companies in the United States, $65.8 billion in loan originations last year. And Bob retired, but Randy Allen, the new CIO, spoke at Nutanix's virtual customer conference .next last September, and he credited Nutanix with being integral to enabling this just incredible growth. And last March, when they got the mandate to work from home, because of their Citrix and Nutanix architecture, they were able to move now all 8,000 employees to work from home within 3 weeks. In August of last year, Forrester did a total economic impact analysis on Nutanix EUC. And Forrester, a big research company, found that an average payback period of under 6 months and 90% faster time to deployment, in addition to much better user experience and so on. And this is something consistent with our own results. So let's look at why Nutanix HCI is able to significantly lower the cost of legacy SAN-based infrastructure. Let's suppose you're going to buy a new SAN. I don't know why anybody would buy a new SAN nowadays, but especially for EUC. But let's suppose for whatever reason you're going to buy one. You have to try and guess what type of resource requirements you're going to have when that SAN reaches its refresh rate. Let's say it's 5 years down the road, and its end of life rate. And so in an EUC environment, that means how many users you're going to have, what type of applications you're going to be running, what type of OS, and what type of resources they're going to have. So you have to buy a SAN up front with enough excess capacity in terms of drive base size and storage controller size, so that you can hopefully meet these resource requirements 5 years down the road. Because if not, you're going to face this forklift upgrade that's very expensive, complex, time consuming, even risky. I mean, you're going to face it anyway after 5 years with the SAN, but at least you hope to avoid having to do it after just 1 year like Fairway, or even 2 or 3 years. So as the chart shows, you're paying for all this CapEx up front for the extra capacity, plus the rack space, power, and cooling to run it all. And the first day you put it in, that starts depreciating. It starts becoming old technology. So by the time that excess capacity is fully utilized 5 years down the road, assuming you make it that far, it's become really old technology. And in the interim, you're also paying for a lot more administrative costs because of, the dedicated 1 person or 2 people or 7 people, however many it is, to manage that SAN environment, to manage the storage fabric, et cetera. Now, Nutanix completely changes the situation when it comes to enabling a great user experience, because now, instead of having a SAN where the controller starts filling up and things start slowing down, and your users get this inconsistent experience. Instead, with Nutanix, you have a perfect linear user experience. Whether you're on 3 nodes, you can start as few as 3 nodes, or 300 nodes or 30,000 nodes, however many nodes. You're able to grow linearly, 1 node at a time, if you like. You also get this benefit from Moore's law, meaning that obviously technology continues to improve. CPUs get faster, capacity gets bigger. So as you're expanding your Nutanix footprint, every new node you're bringing into your environment's incorporating this latest technology, meaning that the density of virtual machines or users per node continues to increase as you scale out your environment, making the ROI or TCO even more attractive. So not only is Nutanix much less complex and higher performing and simpler than SAN-based architecture for an end user computing environment, but it's also the best HCI platform for Citrix. Nutanix's first patent was in 2011 for data locality. And unlike all other HCI solutions, Nutanix uses a sophisticated algorithm to distribute the hot data ahead of time to the nodes that need it. I like to use an analogy of users going to work in the morning. You know, they all need to go on this highway, and it's analogous to booting from the master disk. Well, Nutanix data locality instead gives all the commuters, you know, their own pathway, their own individual routes to work. No traffic jam and no speed limits. Nutanix Files turns file services into an application running on the hyper-converged software stack. You no longer have to purchase these appliances and deploy them and manage them and upgrade them, these file servers for your user profiles and your home shares. Files can also significantly reduce the latency involved in going across the network. As an example, one of our new large banking customers formerly had 50 file server appliances. You know, they're all expensive, and it would take users an average of about a minute to access their directories. Ransomware obviously is a huge security concern today, and seems to get worse by the week for a great many organizations. It's also now a multi-billion-dollar industry that more than doubled last year. And it's no longer just about encrypting data, but rather stealing it and then threatening to publish it if you don't pay. And preventing ransomware now means not just data backups and worm, but also microsegmentation, layer 7 inspection and threat detection, file analytics, and anomaly detection. And Nutanix makes it easier to implement all these security best practices at the infrastructure level rather than relying on a complex matrix of bolt-on security products. Nutanix's microsegmentation product is Nutanix Flow. And from a very simplified perspective, I like to say it's analogous to a gated community. You know, once you drive through the main gate, traditional security lets you then break into any house you want. Microsegmentation installs the equivalent of a lock on every door of every home. So Nutanix Flow enables individual VM, meaning user level isolation from all the other users, all the other VMs, both internal and external networks. It also makes it easy to define security policies to protect the VMs. And like all Nutanix products, Flow is extremely simple. You're able to deploy it in just a single click. And as I mentioned, I joined Nutanix to start our channel partner program before moving on to financial analysis. And one of the first partners I recruited was Choice Solutions, a Citrix Platinum partner, a partner since 1992. And Jim Steinlege, CEO, said, "I can't emphasize how much time we used to spend dealing with infrastructure and storage issues. Nutanix enables us to achieve our goal of providing users with a better experience than their physical desktops from day one." JetBlue runs all their Citrix environment on Nutanix. General Manager of IT Infrastructure said, "The ROI from our Nutanix project was very positive. When you can displace a lot of separate software and hardware components with an integrated solution where you get everything in one place, it produces tremendous savings. Nutanix also lowered the amount of ongoing support and resources needed to keep everything running. This allows our company to spend more on making our customers happy." And that's a recurring theme with Nutanix customers and technology over and over again, freeing up IT to spend their time on customer sat and running the business. You know, innovation and automation is becoming essential for nearly all organizations. But how do you know which technology to deploy, if any? I found over the years that an informal process for evaluating disruptive technologies often doesn't work well due to several factors. One of them being what we call personal agenda or agency factors. Suppose, for example, an IT administrator is getting ready to retire in 2 or 3 years, and maybe he doesn't want to have to learn a new technology and figure out how to deploy it. Or maybe somebody else has years of relationships with legacy vendors that she values, or someone else has built her career around legacy certifications she's achieved, and she doesn't want to see that go away. When you have this type of personal agenda, it can make it difficult for unbiased analysis results to get to the decision makers. And I believe this is certainly the minority of cases, that most IT administrators are genuinely curious about new technology. They want to learn about it. If it makes sense, they want to bring it into their organization, even if it's at their own offset to their own comfort level. But even in these cases, they're subject to what we call confirmation bias. The tendency to look at disruptive technology through the status quo lens of what we know. And I find this to be particularly acute when it comes to evaluating financial nuances, like I went over with the Moore's Law scenario. As just another example, with Nutanix, pioneered HCI 10 years ago, certainly mainstream, and yet we still commonly get questions, what is your cost per gigabyte or per terabyte? Because that's how we measure storage. And it's a great metric if, for whatever reason, you're going to buy a new SAN or NAS, but it makes absolutely no sense in a hyper-converged world. As another example of status quo bias, consider the whole virtualization lifecycle. When I started my VMware consultancy in early 2005, the biggest objection we would get from IT professionals: you will never put my production server into a virtual machine. Now, we laugh about that today, and yet Gartner, who is in the business of projecting IT trends, saw what was happening in the public cloud provider space with this transformation of virtualization years ago. And over 4 years ago, March 2017, they retired their Magic Quadrant for virtualization. And today, every leading public cloud provider and hybrid cloud enabler, meaning Nutanix, while we all support legacy standalone commercial hypervisors, for our own customers, we offer Linux-based hypervisors. In fact, all but Azure are KVM-based, that are integrated into our software-defined stacks. And this makes it much simpler. You don't have to buy a separate management tier that you have to set up and configure and figure out how to scale and make resilient, figure out how to patch for security issues. That, the big one just cropped up last week for a big commercial hypervisor. They're secure, they're scalable, they're resilient, they're just there. And so using a formal financial analysis process helps shed a spotlight on status quo bias, on confirmation bias, so that the best results, so that the unbiased results can get to the decision makers, so that they can make the best decision for their organizations, whatever that happens to be. I run a team of business value analysts at Nutanix. We help clients evaluate disruptive technologies, obviously including Nutanix, across the globe. We call this initiative Project Superhero because it tends to make us heroes out of our customers. And there is a challenge Nutanix sometimes faces in large enterprise organizations, because they'll bring in Nutanix for a particular use case where it inevitably runs really well, but so well that IT kind of forgets about it as they're dealing with the 38 projects they're behind on and the 18 things that are broken, and they just kind of forget about it. And I would say that was kind of the case at Seattle Children's, where a new IT executive was unfamiliar with Nutanix, and he questioned, hey, why are we spending this money on hyperconverged software to host one of our primary workloads, Citrix? And so as part of the financial look-back analysis, we quantified their cost of downtime, something that was easy to do because they tracked it. And we showed this executive that when they went from their 3-tier infrastructure in 2016 to Nutanix the following year, that they reduced their cost of downtime from almost $30 million to essentially zero. And he made the comment we love to hear: why aren't we running Nutanix everywhere? And the CIO at .next last year, a customer conference, credited Nutanix with giving them 5 nines of uptime for their 4,000 concurrent daily Citrix users. Now, public cloud, of course, has this tremendous momentum. AWS alone is on a $50 billion run rate. Well, you combine this momentum with the deep frustration of legacy IT infrastructure, the complexity, the high cost, the inflexibility, and you get this pressure for organizations of all sizes to shift to public cloud. During my frequent conversations with organizations across the globe, they'll often tell me, many times proudly, we have a cloud-first policy. Well, as an analyst, I like to take a step back and evaluate people's strategic decision-making. So my response to everyone making this claim is simply why? What type of research and analysis went into this choice? I've heard responses ranging from the CIO told us to do it, to the board thinks it'd be a good idea, to my favorite and the most common one, we want to save money. But rarely are these reasonings backed by data or critical thinking about the most cloud smart decisions for the business. And it turns out that public cloud is expensive, at least for predictable workloads, which just so happen to make up the majority of workloads for most organizations. It's the whole rent versus buy equation. You know, if you're going to use a car just a few weeks out of the year, it makes way more economic sense to rent it. But if you're going to use it all the time, it makes way more economic sense to buy it. The exact same thing is true with public cloud. If you have an elastic workload, burstable workload, put it in cloud where it's much less expensive. But if you have a predictable workload, put it on-prem on a world-class software-defined HCI infrastructure like Nutanix, and you're going to be able to run it for probably 1/4 to 1/2 the cost of public cloud. And this is echoed by many, many reports. The Flexera 2020 State of the Cloud report says that 82% of organizations struggle with managing cloud spend and are over budget by an average of 23%. The IDG State of IT Modernization 2020 report you're looking at says that 7 in 10 organizations have experienced higher than expected cloud costs. I wrote an article for Forbes last year about using a formal financial analysis framework, not only to help mitigate status quo and confirmation bias, but also to help alleviate all this pressure to lift and shift to public cloud. And instead, the analysts can gather the data to start putting together an optimal cloud smart strategy. Now, in my opinion, HCI is imperative to running both an effective and a cost-effective private cloud environment. It sharply reduces the time it takes to build the software-defined infrastructure necessary to support private cloud. It also happens to be the ultimate platform for both hybrid and multi-cloud. And this isn't only Nutanix's opinion. IDC's Vice President of Research, Eric Shepard, said in an article last year where he's interviewed that hyper-converged systems are becoming the backbone of the multi-cloud world. Prior to the hybrid and multi-cloud EUC environments, we really lived in kind of a dichotomous environment of a separate on-prem and user computing with virtual desktops and apps, or you could do a desktop as a service running in public cloud. And this would mean that you'd have 2 sets of apps, 2 sets of desktops, 2 sets of data. Enterprises were forced to maintain 2 different environments for different reasons. You know, this would increase operations complexity, increase headaches. But today, a hybrid and multi-cloud end user computing architecture solves this problem. In this picture, we have a mapping of a potential desired end state with a full hybrid EUC implementation. It shows a mix of both private and public cloud. It also reflects a big trend in EUC, moving the control plane to Citrix Cloud, you know, CVAD services. Nutanix and Citrix have years of jointly engineered solutions together. And one of the great things about this is that Citrix administrators don't have to go to central IT to try and get a new LUN or more IOPS. You know, instead, they can modify their environments or provision additional Nutanix resources themselves, as well as provision both Citrix virtual apps and desktops through Citrix Studio because of the various integrations with Citrix. And you can connect to Citrix Cloud via Nutanix's management pane, Prism. The foundation of Nutanix's cloud strategy is Nutanix Clusters, which is Nutanix AOS, or our HCI operating system, ported to public cloud running on bare metal. Now, because clusters let you operate the same way on-prem as in public cloud, it eliminates the need to have different staff to manage a mixed private and public cloud environment. Nutanix Clusters let you use the same tool sets, skill sets, operating models, IT governance, and even the same security policies for both on-prem and public cloud. Clusters is also on the Citrix marketplace. Now, DR is the ultimate elastic workload, obviously meaning for public cloud. Hopefully you never need to use it. So by using a combination of Citrix and Nutanix clusters for VDI desktops, it means that you can be up and running extremely quickly, even if the worst happens. And the great thing from an economic perspective is that just enough of the cluster is kept up and running in public cloud to keep the data and applications in sync. But it's not a whole hot site requiring all these different resources and cost. And the architecture is, by far and away from what I've seen, the lowest possible cost model for disaster recovery for EUC. I mean, there's no cheaper way to do it and as effective to do it. Penn National Insurance is using Citrix and Nutanix clusters. They wanted to improve their efficiencies by reducing the cost as well as their time to recover during a DR event. A downtime for them would have meant not only loss of productivity, but also revenue and reputation. Dan Morrison, Director of Infrastructure and Operations at Penn National Insurance, said, the COVID pandemic has been a great illustrator of how beneficial choosing the right technology is. We were fortunate that we had just executed our business continuity plan right before the pandemic hit. We were able to easily transition to a 100% work from home environment in just one day, since we're already running our virtual desktops on Nutanix. And it's not just EUCDR that Nutanix clusters makes less expensive than public cloud. It's really all workloads. This was an example of a TCO analysis we did for a customer, and it's not just EUC. In fact, it's not even stratifying elastic workloads from predictable workloads. It's a mix of all workloads. And we gave them 5 different scenarios. On the far left was the 3-tier environment. The far right was Nutanix clusters. And you can see for this particular use case, Nutanix clusters running in public cloud was a little more expensive than the 3-tier environment. In many cases, if not most, it'll be less expensive. It was quite a bit more expensive than Nutanix on-prem because of the mix of workloads, but it was millions of dollars less expensive than the public cloud native scenarios, and that didn't include the huge cost typically involved for replatforming applications to optimize them for public cloud. It also didn't include all the huge savings potential from being able to migrate to public cloud, maybe in weeks instead of in months or even years. Nutanix's award-winning CIO, Wendy M. Pfeiffer, says, relax about the technology, focus on the business. I couldn't agree more. My team strives to uncover the business objectives, and then we'll map those back to the IT initiatives, then ultimately back to the disruptive technologies. And let's go to our last poll. Well, my last poll.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've just brought up the next poll here on the screen for everyone out there. How aligned is IT with the business? We want to hear your feedback on this. The options here are you feel like you're, lockstep with the business. Maybe you periodically interact to ensure IT is working in the same direction as the business. Or maybe you're still, trying to get in sync or get introduced to exactly what the business is and really who's running the business. And I know this is always a big challenge for IT organizations out there. So we want to hear your feedback, and I'll share the results of this in just a moment. All right. Thank you, everyone, for those responses. We do appreciate that. Let me share the results now. And it looks like 55% say that they are periodically interacting with the business. 27% feel like they're lockstep. And 17% say they're still trying to get introduced to exactly what the business is. Steve?
Yeah, I unfortunately find those results to be pretty consistent. And when we start analysis, actually the first question I ask, or my team asks, is, what is your business going to look like in 5 years? Because I just don't think it's possible to come up with a really cohesive and meaningful and relevant IT strategy without having it aligned to the business. December 15, 2020, Gartner survey found that 90% of HR leaders will allow employees to work remotely, at least part-time, even after the pandemic ends. But work from home, work from anywhere poses a whole raft of new security issues, since organizations are essentially extending their network into someone's home. This enables an infected device to spread to the network. IT also loses the network traffic visibility for remote users. Laptops connecting to corporate via VPN also increases the chance for data theft and loss. IT operations are now at risk, greater risk for ransomware and for malware. Regulatory compliance and data privacy concerns increase. In fact, 59% of IT decision makers consider security and IT efficiency the top EUC purchase decision. And both VDI and desktop as a service solutions do help, or even completely in some cases, mitigate these issues. One thing, you can give users a fresh desktop every time they log in, at least if you set it up this way. And HCI makes VDI both dramatically easier and more affordable, since organizations can start small and then upgrade or move to VDI in conjunction with their PC or laptop refresh rate. And this is an example of a ROI analysis we did for a customer, a 1,100 user healthcare organization in the Midwest that's growing very fast. And as you can see, in their case, moving to VDI in conjunction with their 5-year refresh rate meant that they could use the budget, just the PC and laptop refresh, to pay for the entire initiative, the Citrix software, the Nutanix software, the hardware, and the partner services to set everything up. So projected 5-year savings of 2.4 million, about 10-month payback. Very, very typical type of results we get. But when doing analysis, we do want to look at the business. We want to tell the story. That's why I call my book the ROI Story. So as part of the narrative, as part of the analysis, we also talked, in this particular case, about security. They were growing so fast and they were behind on their security patches. Well, that could lead to a breach, could lead to millions of dollars in fine. EUC would largely help mitigate that. Same type of thing when they did an acquisition and trying to get rid of the drives and so on, clean the drives, wipe the drives. That's the word I'm looking for. We also looked at user productivity and particularly zeroed in on clinical worker, specifically doctor productivity, because it turned out that they went to Citrix on Nutanix, that the average physician was able to save a lot of time, from reducing her login times, reducing her round trips to dedicated billing stations, CPOE stations. In fact, the average physician saved enough time to see one more patient a day. Well, you multiply the revenue of a patient by all the physicians, by all the days over a 5-year period, and that adds to $120 million in increased revenues on top of the 2.4 million in already impressive infrastructure savings and all the security benefits. So you put this all together, and it makes for a very compelling case. And with that, David, let's go ahead and open it up for questions from the audience.
Absolutely, yeah. Great presentation, Steve. We do have some questions for you from the audience. You have generously put up your email and Twitter handle there. So I want to point that out to everyone before we move on here to our final poll. And that is just simply, what additional information would you like about the Nutanix solution, specifically around EUC here? And we'll leave that up. Of course, this is a multi-select question, so feel free to select more than one option on that poll. So if you have a question, now is the time to get it in. Don't forget about our best question prize that we're running today as well. Let's see here, Steve. First question I wanted to ask you is, what's the story behind the Roi Dude?
Roi Dude is my even geekier alter ego. I use him in the book throughout the chapters to give tips out, profound tips, like the purpose of IT is not the cost of IT. And there's actually a funny story behind that, though. When my book first came out, it was just right before our .next customer-facing conference in 2019. So it was physical. It was in Anaheim. And this was also just after I had happened to injure my shoulder snowboarding. So I was in a sling, I was in some pain. And my hotel room where I left my wallet, I had my credit card with me, was quite a walk to the convention center. And upon arriving, they had a sign, must have valid ID. And, I wasn't concerned. I walked up to one of the registration desk and I said, hey, I've been an employee at that time at Nutanix for over 6 years. I'm a speaker at this event. Well, that didn't work. Now I was getting a little concerned. I asked to speak to a supervisor. I said, I have a credit card. He said, I'm sorry, you must have a government issued photo ID. So dreading this long walk back to my hotel in my sling in pain, I was inspired by one last idea. I reached into my backpack and I pulled out my brand new copy of my book. I flipped it open to a picture of Roi Dude and I said, look, that's me. And they let me in. True story.
Awesome. I love it. And I've actually got some limited edition Roi Dude comic books that I'm sure not a lot of folks have out there. So I'm really proud of those as well. Let's see, moving on here. This question came in a variety of different forms, but I'll just summarize it. And that is, what's Nutanix's really unique, value proposition or a point of distinction, would you say, in the industry, if you were to kind of try to sum it up?
We also have as a moderator Kevin Bacon, who's a EUC solutions architect. Kevin, you want to answer this? It's not
sure,
real
Stephen.
technical.
Yeah, I think the benefits specifically for Citrix, you touched on it a lot with the data locality. That's really about getting the best performance, getting that local-like I/O experience where everything's very snappy, the applications open quickly, logins are fast, boot storms are irrelevant. There's no impacts to IOPS and I/O slowdowns, and then you also talked about the linear scalability. So the idea there is that as you add more users, you're going to need more of everything. You're going to need more processing, more memory, more disk, and so that's kind of that model where we can scale all of those things linearly as you add users. And then we have another unique feature called shadow clones, and that's where we can take for non-persistent desktops, where we can take that base image and then have it cached locally on every node or every server in your cluster. And so even if you're doing those non-persistent desktops, even if you're taking a lot of snapshots, we can still have really great performance. And we've also seen where cloning, whether you're doing like with Citrix with machine creation services, you can see the cloning operations takes a fraction of a second. So you can do thousands of desktops in a matter of minutes. And so we've really seen that be some of the big benefits for the Citrix admins and users.
Awesome. Great answer. I appreciate you detailing that. Let's see. Here's a good question from Carrie, I think, who's asking, what about scaling? I mean, obviously Nutanix can scale up, but what about scaling down cost-wise even for kind of the small and medium-sized companies? Could this still make sense for them?
Yeah, absolutely. We've done analyses, I think, for environments with as few as 30 users where it still makes sense. Probably the bigger the environment, certainly the more absolute dollars you're going to save, and probably it makes even more sense. But even for small environments, again, you don't have to buy a SAN as long as you can put in 3 nodes to start. Then I think it makes all kinds of sense. Kevin, you have any different perspective on that?
Well, yeah, I think I just read the question a little bit differently. I took it to mean, if I've got 1,000 users today, but I'm only going to have, 500, in a couple of years from now, how does that impact the ROI? And I was just thinking, just in terms of our move to subscription over the last couple of years, a lot of times customers are now buying, in 1-year subscription terms. So that would be a way I would think that if you wanted to scale that down, and you had no other purpose. The other thing we can do too that's really interesting is moving workloads around. And so just as we can add servers and nodes and all that CPU processing as you're adding users, we can also, without disrupting the business, without even having downtime, we can eject nodes or servers out of the cluster. And so we can do that if there's, if you don't need that resource in that cluster, we can eject it and then use it somewhere else. So another workload. Another common area where customers do that is if they want to have a DR environment, but they don't a lot of times your DR budget and your production budget don't necessarily align. but you usually want to have the latest and greatest stuff in your production environments. You're using that 99% of the time. And then what you can do is you can eject the older nodes and then move those to your DR site, and that way you can sort of roll in the newer hardware into your production site, roll off the older hardware, and that becomes your DR environment.
I like that. And I think that also helps to answer. There's another question here from Bradford who was asking about the licensing model for the Nutanix EUC solution. Are you saying it's a subscription?
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be a subscription model, and we can run on all sorts of hardware now. All the major manufacturers as well as some different cloud vendors as well. And so for the most part, it's a subscription based on the number of cores and the amount of storage that you're using. And then we have a lot of our technical expertise around translating the requirements of the users and the applications into what how much hardware, how many servers, how many nodes, what sites, those kind of things, those kind of technical requirements. We can produce those for you and with our partners as well. And then in certain areas around the world, we actually have a VDI specific license where you can actually license Nutanix based on how many users you're actually going to be running on that. So some customers like that in terms of knowing kind of a fixed cost per user, regardless of how much hardware it is. So we've got a couple different flavors, but it's all going to be basically on a subscription basis.
Yeah, excellent. That sounds very convenient, very flexible. Here's another good question from Felix, who's asking if you have any advice to help drive digital change. I know maybe Steve, you've talked to so many different customers out there. Any piece of advice you can share to help to drive change?
Yeah, I'm assuming you're meaning specifically by the IT department,
right?
Like I said, like the Enterprise Cloud Index report showed that in most organizations, the majority of organizations are now looking at IT more strategically because they've had to survive. From actual mechanics of moving to digital, I like the idea of establishing an innovation office, something that can assimilate ideas and pick the best ones and give rewards and recognition to people that have innovation. So kind of help spurring this culture of innovation. I'm really kind of equating innovation with digital here because you're not going to get to digital in most cases, without a lot of innovation. Also, again, I think it's going to be, if you're stuck with SANs and legacy 3-tier infrastructure, it's going to be really, really hard and really, really expensive to get to digital. You're just not going to have the agility baked into your infrastructure that you need. I mean, that's why there's been this massive push to public cloud, I believe, is primarily to just get out of that legacy infrastructure. But then you end up spending a massive amount on public cloud. I don't know if how many of the viewers have seen this, but Martin Casado, the general managing partner at Anderson Horowitz, had an article the week before last called "The $1 Trillion Paradox," and was the first time I've seen a noted kind of figure out there, a person, and it was along with another partner from Anderson Horowitz, who they very detailed, in-depth financial analysis about how the cost of cloud is impacting a whole bunch of customers. In these cases, that they looked at software as a service enterprises, but they're talking about withdrawing billions and billions of market cap because of the cost of cloud, and the same exact thing applies to enterprises and customers of all sizes. I mean, again, cloud makes all kinds of sense, public cloud, for elastic, burstable workloads, and sometimes other workloads too. But you got to do the math, you got to do the analysis. So back to the question about digital, I always like financial analysis, and you do an analysis on the cost side if you're still running SAN, or if you're have a cloud first initiative, whatever. Come up with the cost and evaluation for what's the best hybrid cloud approach, because that's going to be it for most organizations, or whatever it is, and how you can reduce money, how you can increase agility. But then also, as part of that, look at the business benefits. If we are able to reduce IT costs and now get more agile, so we can truly start moving to digital and get more knowledge about our customers and be able to make decisions faster and be able to increase their purchasing and so on, how is that likely to impact the business in terms of revenues, et cetera, and put it all together. I mean, to me, a financial analysis is like putting on a play. As a producer, you gotta get the right director and the right script and the cast and the lighting and the sound and the set and 1,000 different decisions. But at the end of the performance, your objective is to have everybody stand up and give you standing ovation. The same thing is true with ROI or TCO analysis. It's your opportunity to use the numbers as the framework, but you want to put in the narrative to, at the end of the day, the CFO, the CEO, the board is standing up and clapping, saying, "Yeah, we need to do this for our company."
I like that. I like that analogy of the play there. Excellent. And then another question that's related to that, they're asking, where can we find the ROI or TCO calculators?
Well, if you're talking about Nutanix specifically, we have them on our website. We have, not the real in-depth ones. We have high-level ones based on IDC numbers, but at least give you a feel for the type of savings. And we have both a specific VDI calculator as well as general server calculators. You can also find them out there. Andrew Libovici, who works for Citrix, has a great VDI calculator. If you want a more in-depth analysis, like I said, my team is happy to assist as well with a customized engagement.
Okay, awesome. Let's see. I know we're running out of time here in our webinar slot. Any final questions that you really want to make sure we cover, Kevin or Steve?
I've been trying to answer as many of them as I can that were submitted. There's about, I think there's over 35 now. So I was trying to get through a few of them. If I don't get to them, I apologize.
Excellent.
Maybe we can get a list of them and we can answer them offline.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm afraid we'll have to do that. So many excellent questions, so little time to cover them all, but we do appreciate all the questions. And of course, we appreciate everyone responding there to the poll as well on the screen. Before we go, I want to announce the winner of our Visa $300 gift card. That's going out to Tim Batten from Tennessee. Congratulations. We do appreciate everyone joining the webinar today. Don't forget about the handouts tab. There's a number of resources available for download there. Make sure you get those before you go. Again, Steve, really excellent presentation. Thank you so much for being on the event today. And thank you to Kevin as well.
Thank you, David. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks to everyone out there in the audience for joining us on the webinar today. For more information on the Nutanix EUC solution, visit Nutanix.com. Have a great day. Bye-bye.